nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable. I'm very pleased to have as our guest for this broadcast DJ McGuire, who is the author of an important book called Dragon in the Dark, which is about the communist Chinese threat to the United States. The subtitle is How and Why Communist China Helps Our Enemies in the War on Terror. Before I forget, DJ, we can't sell anything on the broadcast, but if they want more information about your book, and where can they write?
If they're for information about the book, they can. There's a website, www.dragoninthedark.com. They can get a summary of the book, some quotes from the book, and various things. For more information on the China e-lobby, they can go to...
Tell me about China e-lobby. That's
Certainly.
Something which you had.
Yes. I co-founded the China e-lobby 4 years ago this April. It's an organization dedicated to exposing Communist China's abuses of its own people, its harassment of its neighbors, and its anti-American actions throughout the world, and influencing American policymakers to move American policy in a more anti-communist direction.
Now, certainly the policies of both the Bush, the Clinton, and the Bush administrations, all three, have been very pro-communist China. Whether or not they call them strategic partners or strategic competitors, the reality is Daddy Bush, Bill Clinton, and Bush the Younger are always doing things that benefit these. And you know, we talk about China. What we're really talking about is the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the People's Republic of China. It's not a legitimate government.
No, not at all.
It's a communist party dictatorship that is at the very heart of the governance of Red China, and they have said, you know, we'll do anything to build our economy except surrender power.
Exactly. In fact, one of the reasons why I refer to it always as Communist China or Red China is to separate it from China the nation, from China the people. It is not China the people, it is not China the nation. It is a communist criminal regime that is imprisoning the largest and arguably the oldest culture on the face of the planet. And they are willing to do anything to retain power, whether that's improve the economy in particular areas, whether that's establish what as I call them, the Potemkin cities in Beijing, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, whether it's slaughtering protesters as they did, as everyone knows, in Tiananmen Square on June 4, 1989.
And as everyone has forgotten. Not everyone.
Sadly, many have forgotten. A lot of folks in Washington, D.C. didn't want to remember it within 24 hours of it happening.
They don't even remember they're shooting down the E3.
No, they don't remember that at all. They don't
forcing it down.
Yeah, they don't remember that. They don't remember the 500 missiles that are pointing at Taiwan. And what I found, and the reason why I wrote the book, was that they don't remember or do not wish to see their economic ties to the Taliban, their missile sales and weapon sales to Iran, their work with Saddam Hussein, helping him integrate his entire air defense network to make it easier to shoot down American planes, their economic and military deals with Syria, their continuing propping up of North Korea, the most active terrorist state in Eastern Asia, and their...
You know, isn't it interesting that we're calling on Beijing's good offices to deal with the Korean threat when we're really talking about the puppeteer? North Korea is the puppet in the hand of Communist China.
Exactly. As I always like to say, Communist China is very helpful regarding North Korea. They're helping move us towards the North Korean position in the six-party talks. The 2 rounds of talks have basically been a sham. They have given North Korea more time not only to build and develop more nuclear weapons, but to give them time to hide them and to make sure they're buried deep underground where we cannot find them.
Now, recently they had another free election in the Republic of China on Taiwan.
That is correct.
And power, although there was controversy, power again passed peacefully. It passed when Chiang Ching-kuo died and Lee Tong-wei was his vice president. Mm-hmm. That was a change of leadership. And then when Chen Shui-bian defeated Lin Chen, of the KMT, that was a peaceful transfer of power.
Exactly.
And in that election, Chen Shui-bian got, I believe, 39.7% of the vote.
That's right.
In a three-way split. This time he got 50.1% of the vote. And many people say that what that means is that there is more of a Taiwanese identity and less of a Chinese identity among the people on the island. What's your view?
Well, I think that there certainly is a lot of that. There is a more people on Taiwan consider themselves Taiwanese than Chinese, but I don't think it's purely cultural. I think the fact of the matter is the people of Taiwan have seen how communist China responded to their building of a Republican form of government. The 1996 election, they responded with missile firings over Taiwan. The 2000 election, Zhu Rongji, the supposed reformist prime minister of communist China, wagged his finger and said, if you vote for Chen Shui-bian, you may never be able to vote again. This time, communist China rolled out the red carpet for the KMT at any opportunity. They made clear from the moment Chen was inaugurated in 2000 that they were going to cozy up to the KMT and do everything possible to help them defeat Chen for re-election. And the Taiwanese people saw through that. They saw through the plot and they said it's not going to happen today.
They did one other thing. They had Jacques Chirac collaborate with them on a communist China, socialist France naval exercise.
Yes.
Intended to intimidate the people on Taiwan.
Yes, Jacques Chirac has proven to be communist China's best friend on several levels. The joint naval exercises 2 or 3 days before the vote was one of them. He also hosted Hu Jintao, the state. I hate to use that word. I use that word lightly.
The supposed successor to Jiang Zemin.
Right. Now, in reality, Jiang Zemin still holds the Central Military Commission chair, so he's still the most powerful person.
Yeah.
But who's a better face?
Yeah.
He looks nicer. But Jacques Chirac hosted him, rolled out the red carpet treatment, made sure all the Falun Gong practitioners were arrested in Paris. Apparently yellow was an illegal color that week. And,
there's not a lot of tolerance among the French, except for evil.
No, there sadly there is not, unless that's right. They normally do not trust other people's electorates. They much prefer other people's dictators.
Why is it that patriotism, self-conscious patriotism, is so absent among business people of major corporations in the United States as well as on Taiwan? Isn't the biggest problem facing Taiwan the fifth column of big business making its deals with the communists on the mainland?
I always remember this phrase, and I tell it to myself every day: what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? That phrase has been forgotten on Wall Street today, and it has been forgotten in the major business centers of Taiwan. What has happened is, at the tail end of what I call the first Cold War, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, Communist China decided that the United States was slightly less of a threat than the Soviet Union was, for various internal reasons.
And geography.
That would be the biggest one. The very long Sino-Soviet border, and the fact that where the PRC did not border the Soviet Union, it bordered Soviet satellite Mongolia. Unfortunately, a number on Wall Street in particular and among the business centers of Taiwan, they still hold, is a combination of still holding that Cold War I mentality, whereas in reality, Cold War I ended for Communist China on June 4th, 1989, with the Tiananmen Square massacre, when the Communist Chinese realized that freedom was a viral infection, as it is for any dictatorship, and that therefore the United States was the greater threat. And, frankly, this rather strange notion that just because the Communist Chinese have made 4 cities look prosperous, that therefore 1.3 billion customers, as the mantra goes, will buy all these wonderful products, whereas in reality, the cadres, the local cadres and the provincial cadres, keep the people so impoverished they can barely afford to feed themselves.
When I was in Communist China, I visited the General Motors plant in, I guess, Shanghai, and we discovered various things. One, that the kind of vehicle one could purchase depended on your standing with the party.
Absolutely.
Lower-ranking people could only purchase the sale, which is a very midget car, and the larger Buicks were only available to the higher-ranking personnel. I also discovered, in looking at the annual report of the business, there really were no numbers in it. They just had a picture of Jiang Zemin, because your financial standing depended on your closeness to the party leadership, and it had nothing to do with the numbers.
Exactly, exactly. Well, if they actually put up the numbers, they'd find that they were all in the red. It is very the only people.
More ways than one.
Yeah, the only people exactly. The only people who from outside who actually make money in communist China are folks who are producing things to be consumed in the American market, so that the sales from that go straight to the communist partner.
In other words, we have so-called American companies which have moved their factories to communist China.
Exactly.
So they can pay low wages and undercut American businesses and put a lot of Americans out of work.
Exactly.
And what most Americans don't realize is that the Bush administration, like the Clinton administration before it, provides aid to communist China in many ways.
Exactly.
Now, when we were there, they didn't really understand who I was or what my perspective was. And I recall visiting...
That explains why you got so much access while you were there.
Oh, we got a lot of access. And as a matter of fact, well, I'll tell you more of it later. But the point I was going to make is we visited the World Bank headquarters. I think it was in Beijing. I forget in which city. And they showed us how they were, in effect, building up the Communist Party by providing, putting them in control of rations in remote areas of great poverty and, in effect, getting slave labor in return, in much the same way that Saddam Hussein used UN aid and rationed it out in ways that reinforced his power in Iraq. It's the same deal.
The one thing that the folks in Washington never seem to learn is that whenever you commit to engagement, to use their word, with a totalitarian power, it will never be to your benefit. It will always be to theirs.
It's a dance with the devil. We have to take a break here. Please stay with us. We'll be right back with D.J. McGuire, author of Dragon in the Dark, right after these messages. There are many conservative organizations, but the Conservative Caucus is unique in that our standard for evaluating public policy is the Constitution of the United States. Our goal is to advocate policies which conform to what the Constitution stipulates and to oppose those which undermine the Constitution. It's clear that the federal government has only those powers which are provided in the Constitution, which were initially delegated by the states to the federal government, or which were subsequently added by amendment. If we adhered to that principle, your taxes would be lower and your liberties would be more secure.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors this broadcast. Our guest is D.J. McGuire, author of the book Dragon in the Dark. D.J., before I ask you to comment on the subtitle of your book, How and Why Communist China Helps Our Enemies in the War on Terror, tell me how, you're very well informed, and you know your subject extremely well. How do you stay informed?
Well, I use several electronic sources off the internet. Interestingly enough, one of the best investigative sources on Communist China happens to be the French wire services. I don't know why, that's just the way it is. But there's also an English language version of the Epoch Times, Chinese language newspaper out of Hong Kong, very much pro-freedom and pro-liberty, very anti-communist, an excellent source of information. And you'd be surprised how much these days even major media reports on events coming out of communist China, because there hasn't been, because the powers that be in both major parties have not focused on the threat that communist China is, or because they just ignore it. It's not something that the media catches. It's not something that typical main media bias catches, and so they generally let it out largely unfiltered.
Now, you graduated from the College of William and Mary in 1994.
That is correct.
Which preceded your interest in this subject to some degree.
That's right.
One of the worst things Bill Clinton did was close down FBIS, the Foreign Broadcast Information Service. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but until he closed it down, it published region by region accounts of important radio, television, and print reviews of significant developments. And I was able to study it very closely. My primary interest at the time was Africa and Latin America. Mm-hmm. And I was able to closely study developments there. And I occasionally glanced at the Far East FBIS, which covered China. Now, that is not generally circulated, but do you know if you can still gain access to its content?
I'm not quite familiar with that, so honestly,
if you can, I would encourage you to check it out. Let's get to the subtitle of your book.
Certainly.
How does Communist China help America's enemies in the war on terror?
Well, very simply, for most Americans, the war on terror is either, depending upon how you view it, it is either a cataclysmic battle of civilizations, or it is a couple of military adventures, either necessary or unnecessary. Communist China does not. Communist China sees the war on terror as a subtext in their Cold War against the United States, what I call Cold War II. Cold War II began on June 4th, 1989 with the Tiananmen Square massacre. That's when Communist China realized the threat, freedom, and liberty at its essence was to its rule. They rely on nationalism and mythical historical slights, some imagined, a few real. And their main objectives in advancing that nationalism is the acquisition of Taiwan. The communists never set foot on Taiwan at any point in its history. The establishment of Communist China as the major East Asian power, and within a generation, perhaps two, the establishment of Communist China as the world's leading power. They see the terrorist regimes as Willie Wolap Lamb reported it once, some kind of check on American power. And they use those checks to block American influence in the Middle East and in Central Asia. Now, that was the why. You asked about the how. Communist China, among other things, has been one of the major benefactors of Iran's nuclear weapons program. They sold Iran 2 tons of uranium in 1991. They provided numerous help with Iran's Natanz nuclear plant and its second nuclear plant, whose host city I cannot remember at this point. They have provided military equipment to Iran, missile development to Iran, missile parts to Iran. Their satellite state, North Korea, has provided gunboats to Iran on occasion. Communist China also reached out to Saddam Hussein in the latter 1990s. In fact, Huawei Technologies, a firm that modernized Communist China's military telecommunications, was in Iraq helping Saddam Hussein integrate his air defense network to make it easier to shoot down American planes, at that point enforcing the no-fly zones, and eventually in the war that just transpired last year. They have numerous economic and military deals with Syria. In fact, then Vice President Hu Jintao, while signing these various deals for the communist regime, once referred to Israel as a colonialist plot to separate from the Arab nation a part that is most dear to it, Palestine. That's an exact quote. That man is now head of the Communist Party and the ostensible head of Communist China. Hu Jintao. Jiang Zemin, who is still chairman of the Central Military Commission, visited Iran 2 years ago and used it to rather loudly complain about the American military presence in Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzia in Central Asia. Communist China signed an economic cooperation agreement with the Taliban mere hours before the World Trade Center fell, as part of their plan to establish deeper ties with that regime while it ran Afghanistan. And in something that was reported about 3 years ago, and almost no one has discussed since, when President Clinton sent those cruise missiles into Afghanistan in 1998, a number of them landed unexploded in the Afghan countryside. Osama bin Laden got a hold of them. Communist China paid up to $10 million for them to reverse engineer them, and gave Osama bin Laden a major financial boost to finance some of his terrorist objectives against the United States and everywhere else. None of this is in a vacuum. None of it occurs by accident.
And none of it is on the front page of our local newspaper.
Absolutely not. You won't see it there.
You know, DJ, one of the principles of war planning is prepositioning. And it seems to me that the Communist Chinese are prepositioning for global conflict. We know of their presence in Panama. We know of their presence in the Bahamas and elsewhere. They're making a major inroad in Africa. They're trying to lay down
Very true.
roots there. And how much time do we have before the Chinese threat to the United States will be more visible, more forthright? Right now they're laying low. They're taking advantage of the greed of American business
Very true.
and the ignorance of our leaders to lull the American people to sleep, even as we are building their economy, and during the first 3 years of the Bush administration, giving them a $330 billion trade surplus.
Exactly.
Which is fungible and which has been used to build up their military. They've tripled their military budget just in the last year.
Exactly. They've increased their defense, their official military budget.
And of course, that doesn't take into account
No,
slave labor
and everything
it's
else.
It's totally lowball.
Exactly. And the fact of the matter is, the trade deficit for calendar year 2003 was $124 million.
Billion.
Billion, that's right, I'm sorry, billion with a B. That basically funded the entire communist China's, that funded their entire military budget for that year and then some.
So MFN for Red China, permanent normal trade relations, their role in the World Trade Organization, the various deals the Bush administration and Clinton before them have given them, has in effect financed their military buildup.
Oh, exactly.
And they now have 500 missiles aimed at free China. And they have missiles which are capable of reaching the United States. The fellow who is head of the People's Liberation Army famously said that if we interfered in their desire to reincorporate Taiwan, that they were capable of launching a nuclear attack on our west coast.
He threatened to incinerate Los Angeles if we came to Taiwan's defense. Now, the fact of the matter is, the threat is visible for people who are willing to look for it, people who are willing to see it. It is there. It can be seen. Hutchison Whampoa, the folks who are in Panama, almost bought out Global Crossing.
Yeah, this is one reason, by the way, as you well know, that Red China is a much more serious threat to the United States than the Soviet Union ever was.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of the overseas Chinese population and because of their extraordinary economic power.
Right.
Russia was a debtor nation. It was a weakling. When Reagan killed the pipeline into Europe from Russia, that was a major factor in their eventual defeat. But the Chinese have sources of revenue and wealth all over the world, and they are an economic competitor to the United States. Indeed, they could cripple our economy. They own 31% of our debt.
Exactly.
And whenever they want to call in that card, you think we've got a bad economy now? You ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, in fact, they're already doing it. I mean, this was not by accident. Communist China deliberately lowballed its own currency in 1994, deliberately to build up, deliberately to build up trade surpluses with the United States and to acquire more of American debt. And right now, Communist China is using that debt now as we speak to keep American interest rates high and to keep the American economy low and slow. Now, the fact of the matter is, what Communist China is trying to do through all these various things is replace us as the lead power in the world, because it is the only way they can justify their regime to their own people. They have nothing else left.
And when the dollar ceases to be the reserve currency of the world, which it could well cease to be as a result of things happening with the euro, with the communist currency, etc., then America overnight will become a third world impoverished country.
And
we have to take another break.
Certainly.
Here. We'll let you continue that when we return after these messages. Please stay with us.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Face the Truth is a production of the Conservative Caucus and is seen twice monthly on the station you are watching. We will be interviewing the movers and shakers of the pro-life movement. We hope to educate and even inspire you about what is being done in our country to protect and to promote the sanctity of life. Please watch us.
Don't miss Face the Truth with Stephen Peruka and Conservative Roundtable with Howard Phillips right here on this station every week.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, Chairman of the Conservative Caucus. If you are interested in the kinds of issues we discuss on Conservative Roundtable, please check out our website, www.conservativeusa.org, or write to us at 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia 22180. Our guest for this broadcast has been DJ McGuire, author of Dragon in the Dark, How and Why Communist China Helps Our Enemies in the War on Terror. DJ, you do a lot of important work. How do people hook up with the China e-lobby?
Certainly. We have a website at geocities.com/China_E_lobby. You can also email me at China_E_lobby@yahoo.com. For information about the book, we have a website for the book at www.dragoninthedark.com, and that gives you a summary of the book, a little bit about myself and the China e-lobby, and some quotes from the book.
DJ, let me just summarize, and I know you and I are on the same sheet of music here. The reason why it is essential that the government of the United States prevent Communist China from incorporating Free China, Taiwan, to its control is because, as Douglas MacArthur pointed out, Taiwan, or Formosa, is like a giant aircraft carrier floating in the Pacific. China is building its threat capability every day.
Exactly.
As long as Taiwan is free, America has a better chance of defending itself.
Exactly. And what we need to remember, and why I mentioned in the book, the reason that they do this, why they support our enemies in the war on terror, Taiwan is the first step for Communist China, the first step to regional dominance and eventual world dominance. So not only do we need to defend Taiwan, but for the sake of the Chinese people, we need to help them overthrow their communist rulers.
DJ, it's over. We could go on for a long time. You've done a great job.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me here.
And thank you for joining us on Conservative Roundtable.